Get ready to get positive. Like I said, I did this at a church, and when I first sort of did these slides up, and so you can't just walk away and say the world sucks and super complex. We have a final next week. I mean, you got to leave with a positive note. So you guys get a positive note too. Congratulations. The We don't need to talk about that. Arab Spring, we talked about that. So I just do want to talk about a couple things, and then we're going to kind of move on from here. IDPs, well, no, we don't need to talk about that. You guys already saw the stuff on the refugees. It sucks. And there's a lot of refugees around the world right now. I don't even think these maps, now that I look at these, I'm not sure these maps are accurate. We do know there's a lot of IDPs, which are internally displaced persons inside of Syria. They're not technically refugees, but they're basically everything but a refugee. They just haven't crossed the border. We know that Turkey's filled up. We know Lebanon's filled up. We know Jordan's filled up. There's just a lot all over the place, plus all the ones in Europe. And then there's been a new, as you guys saw in this video, there's been a new wave of refugees from the most recent fighting. Again, refugees that I'm not sure are going to be able to return home very easily, or will want to return home very easily. So that is also an element of U.S. foreign policy. In other words, what should we do with refugees? You can say, well, that's the UN's problem, but it doesn't really work that way, because refugees can cause instability. Refugees cause humanitarian concerns. People see it on the news and they think the U.S. needs to do something about this. So, even if you're not doing much, what should the U.S. be doing and why? Okay, so that's that. What I want to leave you with is with this particular idea for today. And that is, I don't expect a lot of you guys to go off and become diplomats or people who work in U.S. foreign policy specifically. For the most of us, the task of understanding U.S. foreign policy is just to understand what role we play as American citizens really in the world. But that's often not very satisfying. When I sit here, when I get to the end of our whole thing about the Middle East and I say, here's what the Obama administration should have done, here's what the Trump administration should do, and then that's it. And that's, have I really exercised my full, that doesn't feel very fulfilling. Academically, it feels great, but as a human being, it feels like it's not enough. So what I'm going to leave you guys with, which I left this church group with, is what are some things you can actually do? Given that you can't formulate policy, maybe someday you will, and that's great. Add that to the list. Make it 11 things you'll do, formulate policy. But in the meantime, what are some things you can do? So first, my honorable mentions. You got to throw pray out there. I got no problem. I'm not trying to say that this is not an important thing to do. I'm just not sure that's exactly how God works in terms of, I don't want to get theological on you here, but I'm not sure God solves your foreign policy problems. But I do think that God can provide guidance in terms of what you should be doing, and can provide sort of your understanding for yourself. I don't know that he's out there actually fixing the refugee problem because you happen to pray today. So that's why I put an honorable mention, because theologically, I'm not exactly sure how that works. So, but it's there. Send money is another thing I put in the honorable mention, okay. If you got a lot of money and you know where to send it, fantastic. I don't know that's the best thing either. But again, it can feel good. So here are some things that you can do. Number 10, you can volunteer with local refugee organizations. One in San Diego is the International Rescue Committee. I'm sure there are refugee organizations in many locations depending on where you're at. San Diego is a big location of where a lot of refugees come. And even if they're not Syrian or even Middle Eastern, that's not exactly the point here. The point is that what the United States should be doing about refugees in the world is not just necessarily coming up with foreign policy, but it's also how we as individuals treat other individuals. So this is a way that you can get involved right here by working with refugees and helping them acclimate to the new culture, that sort of thing. All right, that's number 10. Number 9 is really just volunteer anywhere. There doesn't have to be a one-to-one thing that I think the stuff in Syria is really important, so I have to volunteer with something about Syria. There's a lot of people out there volunteering. they can do that while you do something else. So just sort of being a good human being is something that can change the world as much as anything can. Number 8, stay up on current events, even ones that don't seem relevant. Man, I think this is really important. I used to do this back when I worked in spiritual development. I used to do this this talk that was about the idea that one of the disciplines, like we have disciplines like, doing daily devotions and discipline of fasting and discipline like that. I think one of the key Christian disciplines is staying up on the news, is to be a part of the world and to understand how the world operates and to not be ignorant of the things around us, particularly when they seem harsh. I really don't like when people say, I don't watch the news because it makes me sad. And I say, it should make you sad because the world kind of sucks. But if you just sort of turn your back and don't notice it, that does not feel very Christian, very human to me at all. Like, understand how the world works and help it to suck a little bit less by knowing how the world sucks. I know that's not exactly academic, but that's my idea there. Stay up on current events. If you need to, rather than stay up on everything, pick some things that you're going to stay up on top of. Like, pick an area of the world or pick an issue and let that be the thing that you keep sort of being informed about. You don't have to stay up. You don't have to read the entire, the world section of the newspaper every single day. That's not what I'm talking about here. But definitely do stay up on current events. Some good places to look would be BBC, Reuters. I don't know if they do AlertNet anymore, but Reuters is a good. It just kind of keeps you up on that. Human Rights Watch. This is the advanced setting. If you really want to keep up on things, go read some of the reports on Human Rights Watch. Find your own sources of news that you believe are legitimate and get after things. One of the reasons I suggested the BBC and not like a U.S. paper or station like that is because the U.S. papers and stations tend to focus on U.S. things that U.S. people care about more, which is not exactly what I'm talking about here. But that is also a good thing. New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, these are all legitimate things to sort of find the current events from. Try to, balance that out with other sources so that you're not just getting one position, one perspective. All right. Keep learning about the world. So set yourself a goal that has nothing to do with school, has nothing to do with anything else, just has to do with you learning about the world. Like a particular goal might be to learn about a new topic, one book a month. Just say, I'm going to learn about this, find a good book on that particular topic, and then learn about it. What you learn at college is not just stuff. You learn. Hopefully, we're teaching you how to learn. So you learn how to learn, so that you don't need a class and a syllabus and a professor to learn new things. That you can now do it. So that's what I'm hoping you are able to do. But, set yourself this goal. Even, maybe like every 6 months sort of say, what am I going to learn in the next 6 months? And put yourself a path. I'm going to read this month, this month, this month, and make it part of the things that you do, like exercise and things like that. Number 6, keep conversations going. Don't just make this an internal monologue, but make it a dialogue with other people. I know some people do book clubs, and that's a way to do this instead of doing like a fictional book that you guys are discussing together, but you can talk about a nonfiction book, or you can talk about topics like we do sort of on Tuesday night discussion groups or things like that. But keep conversations going. Make sure that you are bouncing your ideas off other people and hearing what they have to say to sort of refine what you think and what you mean. Vote is a good one. That one of the ways this whole democracy thing works is that that our leaders respond to what we want. If you're not voting, then your demographic doesn't really count. And so if you want them to respond to the things you want them to do, you got to vote. Be a compassionate consumer. I got to be honest with you, I don't really know what this means. That could be part of this up here. But I do know what non-compassionate consuming is. I don't know what compassionate consuming is, but I know what non-compassionate consuming is. So don't do that. But do try to find ways to, We're going to live in this capitalist system. It's going to be problematic. It's going to be systematically awful. But can we consume things in a way that doesn't create more headaches for people around the world? So one example might be gas. Like, think about how you consume gas, because how we consume gas has a big impact on how the Middle East politics sort of work out and the people there and all that kind of stuff. I don't exactly know what that means. This is not me telling you to do anything specific. It just means if you're going to be a compassionate consumer, find out for yourself what that means. All right. Number 3, avoid compassion fatigue. This can get all very overwhelming. It can feel like there's so many problems in the world. I can't really solve them all. So screw it. I'm going to go watch the Kardashians, which is fine. If you want to watch the Kardashians, that's totally fine. In other words, find a way to balance things. Don't just dive in full on and then burn out in a week or a month. Find ways to keep your compassion alive. Don't let your compassion sort of get overwhelmed by things. Another thing, again, I was at a church, so this is a possibility here. Continue supporting your church and its social justice initiatives. And I would say for you, think about all the ways. Church may be one of the ways, but there may be other ways that you get involved with social justice initiatives, whether you volunteer, whether you are part of a club, whether you personally do stuff like that, or wherever you end up working, what they do. Find ways to sort of, I know this is a trigger. Don't worry about the trigger on the social justice. That's not exactly what I mean here. I just mean things that you think make the world better. Continue supporting the organizations you're a part of and the initiatives that make the world better. And then number 1 is, that whole story of the Good Samaritan. Be that dude. I don't have to go over the Good Samaritan idea again, but the idea of the question of who is my neighbor. Have you thought about who your neighbor is? Is your neighbor, just sort of the people of America, or just the people in your sort of circle, or is your neighbor some of those people that we saw on the BBC video? Is your neighbor some of those kids in those pictures that we saw? That's the question of, what does that mean to be that Good Samaritan in the world? I think this is a profoundly human question, a profoundly Christian question that we need to keep struggling with. I know this didn't feel very foreign policy here at the end, but you know what? What are you going to do? So that is it. We'll talk a little bit more tomorrow. I'm not going to make Friday a lot. I'm going to make it pretty easy. And that's it. So I will see you guys on Friday.